Annual crops are honest work, but they come with a reset button. Every spring you plant, every fall you harvest, and every year you start over again. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine planting one tree on a Saturday afternoon and then having it quietly feed your family for decades, sometimes for longer than you'll be here to watch it. In this video, I'm sharing 8 backyard trees that can feed you for decades, low-maintenance staples that keep giving year after year. And there are 2 surprises coming. One is a tree that can drop hundreds of pounds of real calories in a good year, but only if you do one important safety step most people skip. And another is a drought-tough tree that makes chocolate-flavored pods and stores like a pantry item. Let's build the long game, calmly and realistically. If you're watching this, you probably feel it already. Maybe it's rising grocery bills. Maybe it's hotter summers, strange springs, or that feeling that every year the garden asks for more energy than it used to. Here's the good news. Trees can be the most patient form of gardening. They don't replace your annual garden, they support it. A few well-chosen trees can reduce the pressure you feel each season. Less scrambling, less "we have to get everything planted right now." More steady food that shows up on time because it's already rooted. Here at Family Yard Kitchen, we focus on what actually works in small spaces, yard, garden, and the rhythms that make family food feel simpler instead of harder. Today, we're going to walk through 8 trees, and for each one, I'll share what it gives you, how long it can produce, where it fits in an ordinary yard, and the simple habits that keep it low maintenance. Before we start, picture your yard in 3 time layers. Layer 1, the quick wins. Figs and mulberries can start feeding you in 2 to 4 years in the right conditions. Layer 2, the steady builders. Apples and hazelnuts are often your 5 to 10-year plan, reliable, storable, and worth the wait. Layer 3, the legacy trees. Chestnuts, walnuts, and oaks are the 30-year and beyond plan. They're not fast food, they're forever food. All right, let's start with the tree that fed civilizations. If you only plant one grandparent tree, this might be it. Oaks don't look like food trees in the way an apple does, but for thousands of years, they were exactly that, a staple food source for many indigenous cultures across North America, Europe, and Asia. Here's the reason oak belongs at number 1. In a good mast year, a mature oak can produce hundreds of pounds of acorns, and the tree itself can keep producing for generations. That's not a garden harvest, that's a system. Now, this is the part that matters. Acorn safety is non-negotiable. Never eat raw acorns. Most contain tannins, bitter compounds that can upset your stomach and may be harmful in large amounts. The traditional solution is simple, but it must be done carefully. You leach them. That means soaking crushed or ground acorns in repeated changes of water, hot or cold, until the bitterness is gone. When the water stays mostly clear and the taste turns mild, then you cook with them. And one more family note, acorns can be harmful to some animals in quantity, especially livestock like cattle and horses, and even pets like dogs. So if you have animals that roam, you'll want to research your local oak species and manage access during heavy drop years. Now, a small detail most people overlook: oak species matters. Some white oak types tend to be lower in tannins and easier to process than many red oaks. So if you're planting on purpose, choose species thoughtfully. This is a big tree. Plant well away from roofs, power lines, septic areas, and anywhere you'll regret in 20 years. Think like an older version of yourself, walking with a basket, not fighting branches. And here's the quiet moral of oak. You're not planting for a single season, you're planting a food calendar your descendants can walk under. Now, if oak is the civilization builder, chestnut is the mountain bred tree. Chestnuts are one of the most misunderstood nuts because they don't behave like a walnut or a hazelnut. Chestnuts are more starch-forward, almost grain-like in how they fuel you. That's why chestnut forests kept many mountain communities alive through hard times. They could grow where field crops struggled, on slopes, in imperfect soils, and still produce a dependable, filling harvest. Now, let's stay realistic. A mature chestnut tree often yields somewhere around 30 to 100 pounds in a season, depending on variety, weather, and care. That might not sound dramatic until you remember that's a lot of meals when you roast them, boil them, or dry them for later. Chestnuts can be roasted and eaten warm, boiled and mashed, dried and ground into flour for baking, or stored with basic pantry habits. If you've ever smelled chestnuts roasting, sweet, warm, almost vanilla, you understand why people kept planting them even when they had other options. Time reality. You're often looking at 5 to 7 years to begin getting a real crop and longer for peak production. This is a plant for your children tree, and honestly, that's part of the beauty. Protect young trees from deer and rodents. A simple trunk guard and a little fencing early can save years of heartbreak. And if you're in a region with past chestnut blight history, look into resistant varieties and local recommendations. Now, right around here, if you're enjoying this slow, practical way of building food security, consider subscribing. Not because you need more videos, but because it helps you keep momentum, one small project at a time. Next, we're talking about something most families don't grow enough of: fats. When people think about feeding themselves from a yard, they picture tomatoes and zucchini. And those are wonderful, but they're mostly water and fiber. Great for health, not always great for calories. In lean times, whether it's tight budgets or just a bad garden year, fats are often the hardest thing to replace. That's where walnuts shine. Walnuts are dense, storable, and deeply satisfying. A handful feels like real food, because it is. And here's a simple numbers moment, slowly. If a walnut tree gives you even 50 pounds of nuts in a decent year, and walnuts are roughly around 2,900 calories per pound, that's roughly 145,000 calories coming off one trunk. Now, walnut is not a plant-it-and-forget-it tree in every way, but it can be low maintenance once established. Timing. Many walnuts take years to get going. Some improved grafted trees can produce earlier, while seedlings can take longer. But once they're producing, they can keep going for a very long time. If you're planting black walnut, it produces a natural compound called juglone that can suppress some garden plants. So don't put it right next to your vegetable beds. Give it its own space, like a wise old neighbor. Dry nuts thoroughly. Store them cool, dry, and rodent-proof. And if anything smells musty or looks moldy, discard it. That's how you avoid problems from spoiled storage foods. Now, speaking of hardy food that stores well, let's talk about the chocolate pod tree. Carob is one of those trees that feels almost too good to be real. It produces pods that taste naturally sweet, often described as chocolate-like. You can eat the pods, grind them into a cocoa-style powder, or cook them down into syrup in more traditional preparations. And the survival angle is strong. Carob can tolerate poor, rocky soil and very dry conditions once established, which makes it interesting in a world where many places are seeing longer dry spells. Now, let's keep the yield claims sensible. A mature female tree can often produce 100 pounds or more in a good year, with higher yields in ideal conditions. The bigger win is storage. Carob pods can be dried and stored in cool, dry conditions for 2 to 3 years. That's not just fruit, that's pantry. And here's a memorable little detail. Carob seeds are famously uniform in weight, so traders historically used them to weigh precious materials. That's tied to where we get the word carat. Carob is not for cold climates with hard freezes. If you get winters below about the low 20s degrees Fahrenheit, you'll likely need other trees. But if you're in the right zone, this one can be surprisingly low fuss. All right, Let's move to a tree most people already know, but often underestimate. Apples aren't flashy, which is exactly why they're powerful. A well-grown apple tree can produce heavy harvests in season, and the real value is storage and versatility. Fresh apples can hold for months in cool conditions, dried apples can keep much longer, and traditional apple cider fermentation gave families a way to preserve the harvest when refrigeration didn't exist. It's hard to overstate what that meant historically. When winter came, apples helped fill the gap: carbs, vitamin C, and real food at a time when gardens were sleeping. Reality check. Many apple varieties need cross-pollination, so you may need 2 compatible varieties or a neighbor with an apple tree nearby. Apples can take years to reach full production, but once they're in their stride, they can produce for decades. Now let's talk low-maintenance habits, especially for older viewers. Here's a routine I love. In season, once a week, do a windfall patrol. Take a bucket, walk slowly under the tree, pick up the good fallen apples you'll cook or dry. Then, if you keep chickens, you can let them into the area afterwards to clean up the rest. They reduce pests, they convert windfalls into eggs, and they keep the ground tidier. Just avoid letting animals eat spoiled fruit in large amounts and keep everything clean and supervised. If this video is helping you see your yard differently, a simple thumbs up tells us to keep making calm, practical guides like this. Now, if you want a tree that can start feeding you sooner than apples, we're going to the quick wins layer. Figs are one of the most satisfying backyard harvests. You pick one when it's soft and heavy, and it smells like honey in summer. In warm climates, well-grown backyard fig trees can produce generous harvests, sometimes 100 to 200 pounds under good conditions, depending on variety and size. But the real fig secret is not fresh eating, it's drying. Dried figs are classic pantry food. They store well, travel well, and concentrate sweetness and energy. And figs often bear relatively young, sometimes within a few years in favorable conditions. Cold climate note. If you're in a colder region, you'll want cold hardy varieties and maybe a strategy, like growing them as a smaller shrub form or using protection methods. This is where local advice really matters. One more reason people love figs. They're often easy to propagate from cuttings, so one good tree can become a few trees over time, slowly expanding your quick wins layer without huge expense. Now, if figs are the sweet pantry fruit, mulberries are the free food tree people forget. Mulberries are one of those fruits grocery stores rarely sell because they're delicate and don't ship well. So a lot of people have never tasted them fresh. But in a yard, they can be unbelievably generous. A mature mulberry might give you something like 50 to 80 pounds of fruit in a season, often spread out over a few weeks. That's important because it means you're not overwhelmed in one weekend. And mulberries are the definition of low maintenance once established. Water the first year, help it root in. After that, many mulberries tolerate drought and less than perfect soil remarkably well. Now, let's connect this to the yard loop. If you keep chickens, consider planting mulberry near the edge of the run, so a few branches can hang over where the birds can clean up the drops. Not over the patio, not over the driveway. In season, the chickens turn fallen berries into eggs and manure, and it can meaningfully supplement feed when berries are falling daily. Use a tarp under the branches. A gentle shake with a pole, and suddenly you're collecting fruit at waist level instead of bending down 50 times. Mulberries also dry nicely, and when dried, they're often described as unusually high in protein for a fruit, which makes them feel more like a food than a treat. All right, last tree. This one often fits smaller yards better than the big legacy trees. Hazelnuts are one of the most practical, everyday survival foods you can grow, because they bring something your fruit trees don't: dense calories and fats in a form that stores well. Now, yield depends a lot on variety and care. For home plantings, a conservative expectation might be 10 to 25 pounds per mature shrub in good years, sometimes more when conditions are ideal. And hazelnuts can store for a long time in shell if kept dry and protected from rodents. Two important family notes. First, many hazelnuts need cross-pollination, so plan on at least 2 compatible varieties. Second, tree nuts are a common allergen, and whole nuts can be a choking risk for small children or anyone with swallowing difficulties. For many families, grinding nuts into meal, flour, or butter is the safer, easier path. And again, dry them well. Label your containers with big, easy-to-read dates and discard anything that smells musty or looks off. Now, let's bring it all together. Here's the calm truth. Annual gardens feed you this year. Trees feed you for decades. And together, they make a yard feel steady. If you plant a fig or a mulberry, you're planting for the near future. If you plant apples or hazelnuts, you're building the mid-range pantry. And if you plant chestnuts, walnuts, or oaks, you're becoming the ancestor someone thanks later. So here's a simple next step. Pick one tree that fits your climate and your yard. Plant it well, water it through that first year, protect it from damage, and label it so you remember what you chose and why. Because every year you delay is a year of harvest you don't get back. And I'd love to hear from you. Which one are you planting first? A quick win fig or a legacy oak for the next generation? One last thing. If you're building the garden coop kitchen loop, Backyard Chicken Basics is a calm little guide that connects windfalls, chicken cleanup, and safer routines into one simple system. It's there if you want the next step. Now, go plant something that will still be feeding your family years from now.